Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented as always by Full Press Coverage. I love doing these shows, Sap, because it gives me a chance to talk about just how great of a season my beloved Boston Celtics are having, because we're going to focus on what the two conferences look like right now and sort of what the path to the finals might in fact be. And the Celtics right now, we've mentioned it a couple times in our last couple shows, but I think it bears repeating, have a whopping 8-game lead on the second place Cleveland Cavaliers, Sap, in the Eastern Conference. And they have a 4.5-game lead over the best team in the Western Conference, which right now is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are up a half game on the Oklahoma City Thunder. So in terms of historic seasons, the Celtics are on pace, I think, to win 64 games, and they are on pace to have one of the best scoring differential years, one of the best offensive years in basketball, and may finish as one of the largest margins of victory in a conference in basketball history. None of that really matters, Sap, unless you win a championship, of course, as we saw with the Golden State Warriors, who beat Michael Jordan's Bulls' best regular season, but then didn't get it done in the finals, losing to your guy, LeBron. But the Celtics have won 9 games in a row, which is the best streak they've had this season and the best streak that's been in the league this season. And it's championship or bust for them, Sep. So, they are certainly playing like a team that looks like the prohibitive favorites. But again, it's all to say, all these gaudy stats don't really matter if the Celtics can't get the job done in June.
It's championship or bust. We've been saying it all season long. They have the best roster in the NBA. They have that 8-game lead in the Eastern Conference. They're going to win 64, 65 games because they're just so versatile on offense. They're really good on defense. They bring it pretty much every night. The conference isn't all that weak. And they're looking at winning the conference by 10, 12 games. If they win 64 games, Cleveland might win 52 and be the 2 seed. Milwaukee might win 50 and be the 3 seed. So they're just lapping the field in the Eastern Conference. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what they have to do over the final 6-7 weeks to get ready for the postseason. Obviously, the easy answer is stay healthy. That goes without saying. Yeah. The two players you have to really watch closely, Kristaps Porzingis, who's injury prone. He's also 7'3". 7'3" guys get injured more than, say, 6'7" guys for the most part. And also Al Horford, who we saw at the end of last season, especially in that Miami series, kind of ran out of gas. So you need those guys playing at a high level going forward in the Eastern Conference and hopefully into the NBA Finals. So those are the two players you have to watch in terms of making sure they have a lot left in the tank and that they're healthy. The key here, Jet, is once the regular season ends, the Celtics aren't going to play for a week because of the play-in tournament. So you want to stay fresh, but you also don't want to become stale. So you want to manage minutes, but make sure that your players are still in rhythm so that when you get that week off, you fine-tune things, get ready for the postseason, and then you're up and running. Because the big thing that really impacted the Celtics, and it has really over the last 4 or 5 years, is they play with their food a bit too much in the first few rounds of the playoffs. Last year, they needed 6 games to beat Atlanta, who they should have swept, or at worst 1 in 5 games. And then they needed 7 games to beat Philadelphia, which didn't even have Joel Embiid in game 1, and Philly came into TD Garden and won. This time around, first round, get the thing done in 4 or 5 games, get the second round done in 5 or 6 games. This way, you're rested, ready for the Eastern Conference Finals against whoever that may be. So that's also important going forward, so that when you get to the finals, and I say when you get to the finals because I fully expect them to be there, that you're going to be healthy, rested, and sharp for whoever represents the Western Conference.
Yeah, Sap, obviously, we're projecting the Celtics to win the Eastern Conference because they're so far ahead, and barring a historic collapse, that should happen pretty handily. Their magic number is getting closer and closer by the day, and we're on the last day of February. But if you're looking at right now what the play-in tournament looks like, they would be playing one of Indiana, Orlando, Chicago, or Atlanta. No criticism to all any of those teams. In the case of Orlando and Indiana, they've had years far surpassing expectations, but the Celtics should knock the doors off any of those teams. They really should. They have no business going to 6 games with any of those teams. Maybe if the Pacers, play at an extremely high level, I could see it, but the Celtics are still they're a much better team. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Sam.
When you look at Indiana, they've played 5 times against the Celtics this year, and they beat the Celtics 2 out of 5, which would lead you to believe it's going to be a 6 or maybe even a 7 game series if the two teams play the same way they played against each other in the regular season. The thing about Indiana is they play at such a high pace that that's difficult to combat during the regular season. But I think in the postseason, when everything is fair, you're on the same schedule, you're on the same travel schedule, you should be able to take care of business against them. Tyrese Halliburton is such a sensational player. He may be good to win a game on his own. Maybe you steal another game and now it's a 6 game series, but you want to get that thing buttoned up in 5 games at the most, because you're just better than any of those teams that you mentioned. Orlando's given the Celtics some trouble over the last couple of years. Beat them 3 out of 4 last year, beat them the day after Thanksgiving this year. They have some athletic bigs that could be an issue. Everyone is talking about the team you want to avoid in the first round being the Miami Heat. I think the other way. I'd like to see the Celtics play the Miami Heat in the first round, take care of business, get it over with, get through your fear of not being able to beat that team. Remember 3 years ago when the Bucks won the championship, they continued to fight during the regular season, and people were putting forth the notion that they should maybe tank a few games to avoid Miami in the first round of the postseason, because Miami had knocked them out the year before in the bubble. Milwaukee didn't listen to any of those people, went ahead and took care of business against Miami in the first round of the playoffs. If you're going to face the Heat, get it over with right away. Now, at that point, you're going to be playing with more confidence as you play whoever, the Knicks or the 76ers or whoever in the second round. And then if you face Cleveland or Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals, you'll be playing with even more confidence. The one team that I think could match up with the Celtics in a 7 game series is still Cleveland. And I thought that last year. They have athletic bigs and Jared Allen, along with Evan Mobley. They have a player in Donovan Mitchell who can win 1 or 2 games on his own in a series. But the Celtics are just better than everybody else in the Eastern Conference. It's imperative they stay healthy, sharp, and then when they get into the playoffs, take care of business early. Let's not go 6 or 7 games with teams that they should sweep or at worst beat in 5 games.
Yeah, I mean that's what Denver did. Last year, Sap. It was they were able to pretty effectively move throughout the playoffs, and that I think that helped a lot with guys who are injury prone on their team, like Michael Porter Jr., like Jamal Adams. Jamal Murray. I'm switching my sports there, and I think that that really helps tremendously when they get those guys some extra rest. And Denver was really, really fantastic all throughout the playoffs last year. They swept in the Western Conference Finals, and I know it was close with your Lakers, but still, you take care of that in 4 games. For the Celtics, yeah, I mean, you're obviously right, Sap, about those things, and I think that another key thing for them is learning how to play a little bit different ways when the three gets taken away from you or you're not shooting well from three. That actually happened to them the other night against a very, very undermanned Philadelphia 76ers team. And they were sort of just toying with the 76ers for a while. But what I liked about that game more so was Philadelphia wasn't actually, no, it wasn't Philadelphia. Sorry. I think it was the game against the Knicks. It was one of those 2 games.
No, it was Philadelphia when they shot 5 of 22
Okay,
from
so
three.
that's what's going on. They were taking a lot of twos in that game, and it was able to propel them to victory. The thing I was thinking about in the New York game was they were not double teaming Jalen Brunson. They were taking away threes away from him, and that was it. So I think Mazzulla is growing as a coach. That's all. That's just a very roundabout way of saying that. And the Celtics, I still don't fully trust him, but showing that you're able to adapt and change the way you play, I think is so important for when you're going on a deep postseason run, because we talk about coaching all the time, and in the regular season, it maybe I could totally buy into it doesn't matter all that much, but you cannot convince me that it doesn't matter in the playoffs when these guys are matching up against the same team night in and night out in a 7 game series. You have to make adjustments and you have to play chess with the other coach. And so it really does come into play there. And a big part of that is adapting how you play and what different defenses get thrown at you. And the Celtics, everybody says as like a joking thing, they're too reliant on the three. Oh, well, they have the best record in the league. Well, everybody's 0-0 starting in the postseason. So you don't want to see them just say, well, we hit a lot of threes in the regular season and we're just going to keep playing this way if they're not shooting the ball well. They have to be able to change the way they play. They have the personnel to be able to do it. And there's going to be games that they need to win without having to rely on shooting 50% from three. So that's what I think is important for them to focus on, is being able to win in different types of ways.
Without question, when you look at what they did the other night against Philadelphia, 5 of 22 on threes, they took 37 free throws. Those are really interesting numbers because for the most part, the Celtics take on average 43s per game, and they shoot around 36, 37%. They're a good, not a great 3-point shooting team, but they beat you with volume. But they've got players who can drive to the basket, that have a good mid-range game, that can post up. I mean, Porzingis is nearly unstoppable down there. Jason Tatum's 6'9", 6'10", certainly strong enough to have a really strong post
I
game,
mean,
which he
Sap,
has
all 5 of their starters could create their own shot.
without question.
That's a very unique thing. Most teams have maybe 2 guys who could do that. The Celtics have 5, and then they have Al Horford coming off the bench.
Right, and Jaylen Brown can score from the low post. Even Drew Holiday's a big physical guard, can score from the low post. So you've got that versatility. Use it so that when you play a team in a 7-game series, they're not going to know what to do against you. They can't just take away your 3, and then if they do that, they know they can beat you. So you got to be versatile. And yes, a lot of that falls on Coach Joe Mazzulla, but it also falls on the players who can recognize these things on the court. And I think it's Jason Tatum now in his 7th year, and Jaylen Brown now in his 8th year. They're becoming smarter and smarter players and better leaders. They can make those adjustments on the fly. If Joe Mazzulla wants them taking a lot of threes, they have the ability to say, well, I think we have a better chance of scoring going down low to Kristaps Porzingis. The other thing which has given the Celtics a lot of trouble in the postseason, especially when they face Miami, is the zone defense. Well, the difference this year is you have Kristaps Porzingis, who can now set himself up in the middle of that zone at 7'3". You get him the ball. He's a good passer. He also can score with his back to the basket. He can shoot over people. You can use him in a lob situation. Best way to attack a zone is to go in, out, rather than just passing the ball around the perimeter, which is what the Celtics have done in the past. That makes it easier for the defense because they don't have to cover as much territory as they do when the ball's going in and out. So Porzingis makes them that much more difficult to defend when you throw zone at the Celtics. So they have more versatility on offense. The defensive end has been sharp all year long. That's not going to be an issue. If they're shooting the ball at an average level in the postseason, they're going to be tough to beat. The problem is if they shoot, 27% and they're chucking up 42 threes, now they're in trouble. You mentioned the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs. They won a finals game last year hitting 5 3-pointers because they're versatile enough on offense with Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and Porter and Gordon. And KCP is a guy who from time to time can contribute in the finals. We saw that with the Lakers a few years ago. So that's the key to the Celtics is, as you said, finding different ways to score the ball because they have that type of versatility.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can just hammer this home in every show where we talk about the Celtics. It is really championship or bust for them. Getting to the finals, even going to a game 7 in the finals, if that's not good enough, it's winning the championship. It's not getting there. They have to bring it home this year. And plus, it's dark days for the Red Sox and Patriots. So either the Celtics or the Bruins need to bring something to Boston. We can't go that long without winning a championship, Sap.
You spoiled people. It's been 5 years. You should have been growing
That's
up like
too
I did.
long.
Oh my Lord! I mean, that's we've now had our second leap year without a championship. That doesn't happen around
We
here,
have
right?
a Red Sox team that doesn't spend any money for some reason, and we have a Patriots team who has a D+ graded owner and an F- graded in terms of how they treat other families. It's not good for those 2 teams right
No,
now. So
and I wouldn't put much money on the Bruins because they generally have good regular seasons and then they peter out in the first round of the playoffs. So it's
a lot
Celtics
of
or
pressure
bust
on the
if you're a
Celtics.
Boston
Yeah, a
sports
lot of
fan.
pressure on them.
Absolutely. So what I look at too is how good they've been this year. You mentioned they have an 8-game lead over the Cleveland Cavaliers for the best record in the Eastern Conference. Now, Minnesota has the best record in the Western Conference. The difference between Minnesota and the 7th seeded team in the Western Conference, the Dallas Mavericks, is 8 games. So
Yeah.
you can see how deep the Western Conference is compared to the Eastern Conference. Also, if you look from 5 to 10 in the Western Conference, Phoenix is the 5 seed, Golden State's the 10 seed. 5 through 10 is separated by 3.5 games. I mean, right now, if the season ended today, the Lakers would be playing the Golden State Warriors in a 9 versus 10. The winner would then play the loser of 7 versus 8 to be the 8 seed. The
Yep.
Minnesota Timberwolves could go ahead and win 56 games this year. Marvelous season. and get stuck playing either the Lakers or the Golden State Warriors in the first round of the playoffs. That's how deep the Western Conference is compared to the Eastern Conference.
And then if you look at the again at the very top, Minnesota only has a half game lead on Oklahoma City and a 2-game lead on Denver. So it's the exact opposite of the East, where you're like, well, the Celtics are running away with this. One of those three teams is going to be the champion of the Western Conference. I guess the Clippers could sneak in there. They're 4 games back, but it's really going to be interesting to see, Sap, how they play down the stretch. Is there going to be any strategy involved, kind of like what you mentioned before with the Bucks a couple of years ago? Is there going to be calls for some teams to try to avoid playing, an 8-seeded Lakers or Warriors, or I guess potentially an 8-seeded Mavericks or Kings? Would you rather play, a team like the Pelicans in the first round? I think that there's a lot of discussion that's going to be around the last couple of weeks of the season when you look at the top of the West, what their path is going to look like. And certainly the bottom of the Western Conference playoff race is a lot more heavy hitters than the East. I mean, the only team that's in the play-in tournament that I think is a legitimately really good team in the Eastern Conference is Indiana. I think is a solid basketball team that's deserving of being a playoff team. And in the West, you go look at all 4 of those play-in teams right now: Dallas, Sacramento, LA, and Golden State. I probably pick them all over the Pacers, and that's the only team that I think is pretty good in the play-in in the East. So certainly depth is a major factor in the West. I think for the Nuggets, they, coming off a championship, probably feel pretty comfortable wherever they end up seated, though, is my guess.
The thing about the Nuggets last year, and look, they were fantastic in the postseason. I picked them before the season started to win the NBA championship. Yes, that clock is, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
You picked them against the Cavs, who lost in the first round. So
that's true too. I wasn't completely right. Kind of surprising, and picked the Celtics and Lakers to meet in the finals for like the millionth time, because to me that's still the most exciting pairing that you're going to see in basketball. Even today, Celtics Lakers would get the best ratings in the NBA finals. But the Nuggets last year were very fortunate. They were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. On their road to winning the championship, they beat an 8 seed, a 4 seed, a 7 seed, and in the finals, an 8 seed. They probably had the easiest path to winning a championship that I can remember. Now, again, the seeding doesn't always tell you everything about the team you're facing. They beat Minnesota in the first round, a talented team, but that
they
took
swept
6 games.
Them. Oh, that was 6 games. You're right.
That was 5 games. 5 games against
so
Minnesota.
5.
Then they beat Phoenix in 6 games.
Yep.
And Phoenix, a good team, but didn't play any defense. And still, Kevin Durant was coming off an injury, and they were trying to find themselves. Then they swept the Lakers, and then they, of course, beat Miami in 5 games. So, they had a sweep, a 5-game series, a 6-game series, and another 5-game series. So they took care of business. They went 16-4 in the postseason. You put those 4 teams that they beat in the postseason last year, their combined record last year was 174 and 154, which is only a 53% winning percentage. So again, they beat an 8, a 4, a 7, and an 8. Those are the lowest seeds you can face in the postseason, other than if you faced a 5 seed in the second round. That would have been the only easier path.
A 53% winning percentage would be good for the 9 seed in the Eastern Conference currently, and the 9 seed in the Western Conference currently.
Right. And I get, okay, and to look at it a little bit deeper, and look, I shouldn't say this. I never take Miami seriously. Like, they can only go so far. They're like the team that gets to the Final Four in college basketball, and then they go out on the court and they're just overmatched. Like,
so Gonzaga,
kind of Gonzaga, yeah. And Gonzaga's actually had teams that were the first overall seed a couple of years ago with Jalen Suggs, and then they end up losing to Baylor in the national championship. I don't think, even if Miami gets to the finals this year, they have any chance against whoever represents the Western Conference. But again, Minnesota, you've got Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, and that's a good roster, but Denver was better. You're facing Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but you're better than them. And then you're facing the Lakers, who by the time they got to the Western Conference Finals were exhausted, with Anthony Davis and LeBron James really having nothing left. And then you got to the finals, and Miami was just overmatched by Denver, and they had one player, really, Jimmy Butler, who, again, gets a little bit overrated. He has some really good playoff games, and then he has a lot of playoff games where he totally disappears, and he did that
He
many of
was
the games in the finals. No, he
not good
wasn't
in
good
the
at all.
finals. He was not good against really good against the Celtics. He had like two
No,
good games against them. He somehow won conference finals MVP, even though by far it was Caleb Martin who killed the Celtics far more
he
than
sure
Jimmy
did.
Butler, which is
Yeah.
a weird sentence to say, but it's the truth.
The Celtics lost that series by
Oh, it
screwing
was so
around the first
bad,
three
so
games.
bad.
Yeah. And then you get to game 7 and they just, pee down their leg. So you look at what Denver did. Yes, it was impressive, and Jokic cemented himself as the best player in basketball, and they were the best team last year, but they didn't really face a team that gave them any problems. No one could really deal with Jokic, but then again, who
Well,
can? So
Sap,
you have to have
say
a
they're the
little
one
bit of
seed
luck
again.
in there as well. You still
Say
have
they're
to
the
have a
one
little
seed
luck there.
again. Sap, are they going to
It
go
would
through a
be
similar path, or do you think it's going to be harder this year?
I think it would be harder because you'd be facing, let's say you're facing the Lakers in the first round. In theory, the Lakers would be fresher than they were by the time they got to the conference finals a year ago. Denver's still better. Then after that, you're probably playing the Clippers. And if the Clippers are playing their A game, they're better than Phoenix was last year because they play defense. And look, Kawhi Leonard steps up big in the postseason. And quite frankly, they're better coached with Ty Lue. Not that that's the reason to say they're better than Phoenix, but I just think they're a better outfit than the Suns. Then if you get to the conference finals, maybe you're facing Minnesota, Oklahoma City, two inexperienced teams who are loaded with talent. And I will guarantee you, if the Celtics are waiting for them in the finals, it's going to be a much more difficult finals for Denver than it was a year ago against Miami. I mean, yeah, the road's going to have to be more difficult because, again, you're facing a veteran team like the Lakers in the first round rather than the conference finals when they're quite frankly spent. They had nothing left by that point. Those games were close. 3 of the 4 games in the Western Conference Finals were close, but by the time you got to the middle of the fourth quarter, LeBron and Anthony Davis just had nothing left. So the road will be more difficult for Denver for sure. But that West is just so deep. I mean, Golden State, Lakers, it's not even really a play-in game. It's only to get to the second
Yeah,
play-in game.
yeah, they
So
have to
one of
win
those
too.
teams is going to have to win 2 games. But the 9 versus 10, that's going to be one of the highest rated games of the year because
Oh
it's
yeah,
Golden State
absolutely.
Lakers,
And
right?
it's single elimination. The
Right.
team that
So
loses that is gone. They can't compete anymore.
yeah, and then the
They're out.
winner is going to play the loser of 7 versus 8, and
Yep.
the way these teams are all bunched together, you could have a play-in tournament of what Dallas. Uh, well, Phoenix probably wouldn't slip that far, but I mean, if they go on a losing streak,
They're only
which
a
they
game and a
can,
half. They're only half a game
yeah.
up of the
How how,
Dallas app. They certainly
how about
could.
how about a play-in of Phoenix, Dallas, Lakers, Golden State?
Yeah, could certainly be that.
That'd be a great, Western Conference semifinals, let alone a play-in tournament.
Yeah, at 5, Phoenix is 7.5 back of Minnesota. New Orleans is 6 seed, 7.5 back of Minnesota. 7th seed Dallas is 8, and Sacramento is 8.5. So you're looking at 5, 6, 7, and 8, all separated by a total of a game. So yeah, that
Crazy.
could absolutely be it right
Yep.
now. The interesting thing for me, Sap, before we talk about our MVP ladder and finish up here, is with Oklahoma City and Minnesota at 1 and 2. It's a unique situation where neither of those teams have been like really knocking at the door, and to have this sort of season, they've kind of both come very talented rosters, but they have had no postseason success. It's rare to see a team come in as a 1 seed or a 2 seed having not won a series in a long time. I don't remember the last
Mhm.
time the Timberwolves won a series in the playoffs. I know they won that play-in game last year. Patrick Beverly took his shirt off and whatever. And then in Oklahoma City, I don't think has won a postseason series since Kevin Durant and James Harden left. So you're talking about 2 teams that the crews that are in there now, the group of players have no postseason success yet. Is that going to be a big factor, Sap, when talking about potential high seeds being upset by low seeds?
Sure, because when Golden State won their first championship in the 2014-15 season, they had some playoff success before that. They had never made it to the finals, but they had won a round. And you could see that they were a team that was getting better and better and better. And at that point, they were a young team with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. To come from nowhere to somewhere is very difficult to do in the NBA. These teams remind me a little bit of Memphis and Sacramento a year ago, who were the 2 and 3 seeds and then lost in the first round of the playoffs because they were playing who? The Lakers and Golden State, experienced teams that were playing good basketball at that point. So yeah,
Which could end
experience
up
does
being who they
matter.
play again, Sap, by the way. The 7 and
Sure.
the 8 could end up as the Lakers and Golden State. Like, so right now, today, Sap, would you pick if it's LA against Oklahoma City and Golden State against Minnesota? Would you pick either of those low seeds in a 7-game series?
I wouldn't, only because Golden State and the Lakers still don't play defense. Now, maybe they're going to be different in the postseason and things get tighter in the postseason. And look, if you get to game 6 or game 7, the Lakers have LeBron, Golden State has Steph. It's a pretty good uh, guy to have on either of those two teams against inexperienced teams. But I just worry about their lack of athleticism, lack of energy, and lack of commitment on the defensive end. Now, again, they can step that up in the postseason on the defensive end. I would probably still favor Minnesota and Oklahoma City, but I would not be shocked at all if Golden State and the Lakers pulled off upsets, because they did it a year ago against Memphis and Sacramento. Although I think you'll probably agree with me on this. I think Minnesota and Oklahoma City right now are better than Memphis and Sacramento were a year ago.
Yeah, I would
Just
say
because of
so.
their high end talent. Like, okay, so if we're going to compare Minnesota to Memphis, okay, I'm taking Anthony Edwards over John Morant. I don't even think that's a
Yeah,
discussion.
and they have a second star and a third
And
really
Karl
good
Anthony
player.
Towns, exactly. And as far as Sacramento, which was a wonderful story a year ago, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is better than De'Aaron Fox. Now, they don't have quite anybody as good as Sabonis, although Chet Holmgren's pretty darn good, and they've built a really nice roster there. But I think they're better than those two teams from a year ago. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if the Lakers and Golden State pulled off upsets. The Western Conference playoffs will be insane. Like, that would be the entire playoffs. That
Yeah.
would be good enough to entertain people. The East looks like the Celtics Invitational if they just take care of business.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm glad you mentioned Shea Gilgeous-Alexander because he's a name that is going to be almost undoubtedly on our MVP ladder step. If we're looking at top 5 candidates right now, we talked about Jason Tatum the other week and that he deserves more, sort of consideration. So we don't really have to talk to death about Jason Tatum. So Sap, you don't have to give me your order right now. You can if you want to, but who are your 5 leading MVP candidates?
Okay, so I like order, so we'll go there, right?
Sure.
This is a
It
podcast, a
was your
talk show.
choice. I didn't want
Sure,
to pressure you too much.
I like lift, you know that. Number 5 would be Giannis, and Giannis is playing at the same level that he's always played at for the last 6-7 years. When he won 2 MVPs and finished in the top 3 a couple of other times, he's right there with Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid and Luka and the rest of them, Jason Tatum included, as the best player in the world. But I have him at number 5. Things haven't worked out with Milwaukee. He and Dame Lillard just haven't connected the way a lot of people thought they would. I wasn't sold on it at the beginning because Giannis has never played with someone this good, and Dame Lillard's never played with anybody even close to Giannis. So it's taking time. They made the coaching change. The team doesn't really play great defense, but they do have 6-7 weeks to figure it out. I have him at number 5. I have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander at number 4. He's had a marvelous season. 31, 6-6. I mean, what more can the guy do? He plays every game. He's good on both ends. Fabulous player. I have Luka Doncic at number 3. He's putting up numbers that are just eye popping. 34, 9, and 9. He keeps that team competitive every single night. Like, it feels like once every 2 weeks he has a game where you go, how the hell did he do that?
Yeah.
Like, the night he scored 73, he was 25 of 33 from the floor. That's 76% from the floor. That's unheard of, other than like the likes of Will Chamberlain or Shaq, who just overpowered people. I have him at number 3. Again, his team is just inside the play-in tournament, so his team hasn't been quite as good as Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's, but I think that Luka's got more to carry than Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has to carry, and his numbers are just absurd. Number 2 for me is Jason Tatum. He's having an incredible season, scoring down a little bit, but he's showing great leadership, self-awareness that there's nights he doesn't have to go out and get 30 because he does so much else on the basketball court, gives you 9 rebounds, 5 assists. I'd say, other than Giannis, of the top 5 contenders, he's the best defensive player. I have him at number 2. But this is Nikola Jokic's award to lose.
Yes, it
He's
is.
clearly he's the best player in the world, and he's proving it again this year. I mean, the other night he had 32, 16, and 16. That's like high school numbers. Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, how can a guy, okay, when you see double doubles, you see, okay, points, rebounds, points, assists. When does a guy get 16 rebounds and 16 assists? Talk about a breadth of
Sap,
skill.
he's almost shooting 60% from the floor.
It's incredible, right? I mean, and how do you even
And he takes
explain him?
threes. He takes
And he
threes.
hits them.
No.
It
Yeah.
all I can think of when I watch him play is like he's the dad playing with his kids and his kids' friends. Like in the backyard, he's like holding the ball above them. He's moving at a completely different speed than everyone. He doesn't jump. He never looks rushed. He's almost like, Paulie and Goodfellas, like Paulie never moved fast for anyone. That's Nikola Jokic. But the numbers are just ridiculous. I mean, here's a guy who could lead the league in rebounds and assists.
Sure.
Like that doesn't happen. And I know Wilt led the league in assists one year. That was total assists, and it wasn't a really high number because assists were tougher to come by back then. It was treated differently than it is now. I mean, it's a very liberal scoring system with assists. Like I like to see how some of these guys put up the assist numbers that they put up, but nonetheless, he gets 16 of them the way it's done now. To get 16 rebounds and 16 assists in the same game. Oh, by the way, scoring 32 points as efficiently as he does, clearly the best player in the league. They haven't missed a step. He's the MVP of the league without question, and he would become the ninth player in league history to have 3 or more MVPs, which is remarkable for a guy who was a second-round pick.
Yeah, and I think that as great as Embiid was last year, I still thought Jokic was better, and I think there was a voter fatigue element. So, I mean, you could be talking about somebody who legitimately could be, if the voting went the way I thought it should have, won 4 MVPs in a row, which is, that's just absurd. So this will be, if he wins, this will be 3 of the past 4 years he's won MVP. For me, Sap, I have the same 5 guys on the list. I did really think hard about adding 3 guys who are my honorable mentions. Domantas Sabonis is leading the league in triple doubles and double doubles. I think that's worthy of something. If his team was playing a little bit better and maybe was able to get to the 4 seed, which I don't think they're going to be able to do at this point, I think he would be getting more consideration. Donovan Mitchell is somebody I really wanted to put in there, but compared to the other guys, he hasn't played enough games. He's played 47 games. SGA, Giannis, and have played 57 games. So that's more than, that's 10 more games than them. So I didn't put him on there. And the third honorable mention I wanted to put on there was Anthony Edwards because of how great his team is playing. And he's the best player in his team. And I think that should always get you consideration. So those 3 are just on my cusp. At 5, I have Giannis, 4, Luka, 3, SGA, 2, Tatum, and 1, Jokic, just like you. I don't think that it's unfathomable that Tatum could win it if their voter fatigue is a thing. Especially if the Celtics end up winning like 66, 67 games or something like that and just, continue to just blow doors off the league. Maybe the Nuggets slip a little bit. Maybe say they slip to the 4 seed. But it's Jokic's to lose, just like the championships the Celtics to lose. I think that's fair, and I think there's no shame in coming second in the MVP race when the league's as good as it is right now. Every team virtually has a star player, and we could be talking about other guys who are fringe candidates, and in a normal year could be considered legit candidates like Jalen Brunson or Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. Those guys are having fabulous years too. It's just an incredibly talented league.
Tyrese Halliburton, although he's missed some
Yeah.
time, he's put up MVP caliber numbers. But again, we're talking about assists, which
Same with Steph Curry. I mean, his team's not playing great, but
another
his
great
numbers
year.
are still terrific.
Another great year by Steph, without question.
Kawhi.
Kawhi, because he's playing this year and proving that he remains one of the 10 best players in the world, and at times in the postseason, the best player in the world. The assist numbers, we'll talk about this in a future podcast. It's just those have exploded now. Scoring's up, so there's going to be more assists, but they're very liberal with assists, but that's fine. They do it throughout the league. I know Bob Ryan has talked about that, he'd like to go back and watch every game of James Harden because he doesn't believe that he's averaged 11 or 12 assists in certain seasons, that it feels like he's starting the game with 5 assists and they just add on from there. But yeah, the MVP race is deep, but it's Nikola Jokic's best player, putting up ridiculous numbers for a team that's right in contention for the best record in the Western Conference. To me, this is like one of the most incredible stories in the history of the sport. a guy who was a second round pick. To look at him, he moves at a different pace than everyone. Does it almost feel that he plays basketball a little bit the way Tom Brady played quarterback?
Yeah, I
In
think
a
that's
sense
a good
that
comparison.
so comfortable in the pocket. Now Brady's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I mean, the guy
And when
was
they got
drafted by the
drafted,
Expos.
they both look like, bags of flour when
They
they were
look
both drafted.
ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, Nikola Jokic has like thin arms, a big butt, barrel chested. Does the guy even sweat? It seems like he can play endless amounts of minutes and never gets fatigued. But it's just in complete control of what he's doing out there. Just reads the game so beautifully that it's amazing to see. I mean, those other
He
guys that
doesn't miss
won.
games either, by the way. He
No,
plays
he plays.
every game.
And you look at the other players in the history of the league, and there's 8 of them that have 3 more MVPs. It's like, holy crap! It's Kareem, Russell, Jordan, Wilt, LeBron, Moses Malone, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. It's like, okay, those are
Yeah,
like 8 of the 12 greatest players in the history
that's
of
the
the
list.
sport.
Yep.
And here's Nikola Jokic, who is creeping up. He's certainly in my top 20 of all time. If he wins another championship and another MVP, he's going to go past Hakeem Olajuwon and Moses Malone and become like, I don't know, the 5th greatest center ever behind Kareem and Russell and Wilt and Shaq. And he's kind of on the heels of Shaq at that point, which is odd because Shaq is Will Chamberlain as well, the 2 most physically imposing players in the history of the league. And then you have this guy who kind of
Yeah, I think that's a good
plays a
future
game.
podcast, Sap, is comparing
Yeah.
him to like where is he going to be? Say
Where's he going to rank? Yeah.
they win the championship, he wins MVP. It's got to put him sniffing top 10 territory. I'm not saying I'd put him in the
Yeah.
top 10, but it's got to
Yeah.
put
I
him
mean,
in range to finish his career in that territory.
yeah. My number 10 guy right now is Shaq with Kobe 9 and Duncan 8. And I think everyone can figure out the top 7 from there. I have Steph at 11. So, yeah, he'd be pushing in that area. And as
He's
far
going to
as
pass
centers,
Durant
I think
at
he's
this
already
rate.
passed him. I think he's
Yeah.
already passed him because he has 2 MVPs. Durant has 1. Durant does have the 2 championships, but Durant did go to a ready-made team, and I've never held that against him. But this guy took an organization that had never been into the finals, let alone won a championship, and his best teammate Jamal Murray. How many All-Star appearances does he
Zero.
have?
Zero.
0. So
Yep.
that says a lot about Nikola Jokic, and he's making everybody else on that team better. But yeah, I mean, if he wins a championship and MVP this year, I'd put him as the 5th greatest center ever, surpassing the great Moses Malone and the great Hakeem Olajuwon. And
Yeah.
even 2 years ago, I would probably bite my tongue ever thinking of saying that, but it's heading in that direction.
No, it's becoming undeniable. If you keep doing it and he keeps playing at this high level and they keep winning and he keeps winning MVPs and putting up these crazy numbers and keep playing virtually every game, you can't deny the guy. So, but I think there's a lot more to talk about with him, but we're running out of time, so we're gonna go. But yeah, I mean, lots of intrigue with the MVP race, lots of intrigue, except for the Celtics finishing first. That's not intriguing. That is a fait accompli, basically. But intrigue in the playoffs in both the Eastern and Western Conference, obviously, and the West is just should be a murderer's row. So we'll get you covered for the rest of the season. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSapp25 at Jet Stryer, and check out our presenting partner, Full Press Coverage. Lots of great stuff on there, especially with the NFL Draft coming in not too long. The Combine's this week, so check that out. And we'll be back with a new episode of the Pick and Roll